Washington, D.C. The economy of the United States is in the midst of a recession, and the unemployment rate is the highest it's been since 1982. Hello, I'm Bob Levey, newspaper columnist and radio talk show host. When the producers of the best-selling video Interview Techniques and Resume Tips for the Job Applicant asked me to host an all-new edition, I immediately saw the benefits that an updated program would have to job seekers in these very competitive times. Now more than ever, to beat your competition and get the job you want, you need to be aggressive and prepared. This program has been revised to stress ways in which you can tailor your job-seeking campaign to be more aggressive and better prepared. Before we get started, let me say a few words about the organization of this program. The information is organized into chapters which are preceded by a title in a distinctive color. This will help you to quickly fast forward to information which is most important to your immediate job-seeking task. The chapters and their corresponding colors are Choosing a Career, Finding Job Openings, Resumes and Cover Letters, Your Appearance, Information about the Employer, the interview process itself, and following up after the interview. We've also included a carefully designed interactive exercise which will give you practice responding to typical interview questions. Throughout this program, we will provide you with various recommended job-seeking practices and techniques. Keep in mind that these are presented merely as a guide. There are other practices and techniques and sources of information which can also help you be successful in your search. Now, let's check in on an interview that's just beginning.
Mr. Peters?
Yeah. Yes.
Would you follow me, please?
Sure. See you guys later.
Mr. Rutherford, this is Mr.
Glad to meet you.
Please take a seat, Mr.
Mr. Peters.
I'm sorry, Mr. Peters. I don't seem to have a copy of your resume. Did you bring an extra one?
No, I thought you'd have one.
No. Did you have any trouble getting here?
Well, it was a real hassle. I mean, I had to take 2 trains and both were late. Was lucky you guys fell behind schedule.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
There really isn't much to tell.
Why don't you try?
Well, what do you want to know?
What about your education?
Well, I went to school right here in town, and I was an okay student, if you know what I mean.
What about your prior work experience?
Well, I had a number of different jobs. To tell you the truth, I don't think any of them would really be related to what you do here.
Okay. Hypothetically speaking, of course, what would you hope to achieve if we offered you a job with our company?
Some skills, basically, I guess, and make some money.
Just out of curiosity, why did you choose to seek a position with our company?
A friend of mine told me you were looking for some people.
Do you know what we do here, Mr. Peters?
Not really. I was hoping to find out today.
Mr. Peters isn't going to get the job. His interviewer could easily see that he was totally unprepared for the interview and that all he cared about was what the employer could offer him, not what he could offer the employer. We'll come back to Mr. Peters in the chapter on interviewing. Right now, we need to take a step backward and cover the steps leading up to an interview. Chapter 1, Choosing a Career. Most people have some idea of what type of job they're looking for. If you do, you may want to take a trip to the nearest library and read any relevant books and articles about the industry you plan to be a part of and the specific career path on which you plan to embark. An additional important step is to find a person who is currently in a position similar to the one you are seeking.
Ms. Myers?
Hello, Miss Myers. This is Scott Austin, John Austin's brother.
Yes, hello, Scott. How are you? And how's John?
He's doing well. You know, he suggested that I give you a call. I'm looking for a job in marketing, and he thought maybe that you could help.
Well, I'd like to talk to you about it, but I'm really busy today.
Well, I only have a couple of questions. I thought maybe you could lead me in the right direction.
Sure.
Questions to ask your new contact might include, how do you spend an average day? What do you like most about your job? What do you like the least? If you had to do it all over again, would you take a different career path? Why? What general advice would you give a person in my position? When choosing a career, you will also need to consider such things as the amount of hours you want to work, the work environment that's right for you, the location of the office, and whether the job requires a lot of traveling. It might even help if you write down all the things which you consider positive and negative when it comes to what you want from a job. Then, later, when you have an offer in hand, you can go back to this list and judge just how well the offer stacks up with what you wrote down at the beginning of your job search. Chapter 2, Finding Job Openings. You'll need to explore all avenues to job openings. Check the Help Wanted ads every day. Also, check your college placement office or high school or vocational guidance departments. One of the best methods of uncovering job opportunities is by networking. Networking is nothing more than contacting your friends, relatives, and acquaintances and letting them know the type of position you are seeking and asking them to assist you in any way they can. Most people will be more than happy to help. The key here is persistence. It may take 10 or 20 phone calls for you to land a job interview, but it will be worth it. Don't be bashful. You must utilize all of your contacts and aggressively follow up each lead. Another method of obtaining job interviews is through direct mailings to potential employers. Mailings will include your resume along with a cover letter. Resumes and cover letters are discussed later in this program. The key to any mail campaign is that it be targeted. Your mail campaign must be well thought out and executed. The first step is to go to a library or bookstore and find the names of potential employers in the field you have selected. The second step is to find out the name of the right person to whom to send your resume. Don't immediately assume that the right person is the personnel director of the employer. This person sees hundreds and possibly even thousands of resumes every year. To give yourself a better chance of having your resume read by someone who will show some real interest in it, it would be better to direct your resume to the person in charge of the department in which you want to work. A short telephone call to the employer will supply you with the name of this person. Before we leave the subject of finding job openings, let me say a few words about one other source, employment agencies. If you are a first-time job seeker, you may not want to spend a great deal of time with this source. Typically, employment agencies only spend time and resources trying to find jobs for people who can be placed relatively easily. These are usually candidates with substantial experience. If you do want to pursue this avenue, however, word of mouth is the best way to find a good employment agency. Ask people you know in the business to recommend a firm to you. You'll want to determine early on if the employment agency gets compensated solely from the employer or whether you will be obligated to pay all or part of their fee. Chapter 3, Resumes and Cover Letters. To get an interview, you'll need a professional-looking resume. A resume is a synopsis of the high points of your life, a scorecard, if you will, of your qualifications and credentials. It must be prepared with the utmost care. If you feel you need professional input when preparing your resume, consult a professional resume writing service. Check your local yellow pages or the Help Wanted section of your local newspaper for a service near you. You may want to highlight particularly noteworthy points in your resume by using boldface or italicized type. Underlining is also effective as long as it's done in moderation. You must make sure to proofread your resume carefully. You should not send it out with a mistake. If you send out a resume that has an error in it, the interviewer may think that you'd be just as careless in your work for the employer. Ordinarily, your credentials should be listed in reverse chronological order. Your most recent achievements first, followed by earlier ones. This is the typical chronological resume. This format should be used by most job candidates. There are situations, however, when a chronological resume should not be used. For example, if you have changed jobs often, you may want to use a functional resume, one which groups your experiences together so that the number of individual experiences and the gaps between experiences are not noticeable when reading your resume. A few quick words about cover letters. When you send out your resume, you should always include a personalized cover letter. It should be printed on the same type of paper as your resume. A matching envelope is a good idea. The cover letter should begin with an introduction of yourself and an expression of your interest in working for the employer. It should then go on to highlight your most impressive qualifications as detailed in your resume. You should also attempt to indicate how your past accomplishments and work experience are particularly suitable to the employer's needs. Finally, in the last paragraph of the letter, there should be a request for an interview, as well as your expression of thanks for consideration of your application. As with your resume, make sure your cover letter contains no errors. This goes for grammar, spelling, and typos. Remember, your cover letter is just as much a reflection on you as your resume is. Chapter 4, Appearance. Assuming your resume has done its job and you are called for an interview, your physical appearance must be one of your major concerns. Just as firms and businesses vary, so do dress codes. Investment firms and blue-chip corporations tend to be conservative. Advertising and retail firms, on the other hand, tend to be more liberal. When researching the employer you plan to interview with, you should get a feel for its dress requirements. If you don't know what the employer's dress code is, err on the side of conservatism, particularly in a business setting. Remember, you can always loosen up your style of dress once you've gotten the job. Appearance does not only include clothing. It includes every aspect of your physical appearance: hair, nails, jewelry, even facial hair. Here is a candidate that appears promising. His hair is neatly combed and he's wearing a conservative gray business suit, white shirt, red tie, black leather belt, black leather shoes, and black socks. His suit is 100% wool. Lightweight wool suits are professional looking and offer the advantage of being able to be worn all year round. When just starting your career, this can be a real bonus if you're on a tight budget. One suit matched with different shirts and ties can serve all your interviewing needs. Appropriate colors and patterns for suits include solid gray, gray pinstripe, solid navy blue, and navy blue pinstripe. Appropriate colors for shirts include white, cream, and light blue. For ties, good colors are red, maroon, blue, green, and yellow. Stay away from pink and orange, and while we're on it, stay away from any loud patterns. This combination works well for most office settings. It is simple, direct, and businesslike. The knot of the tie should be neat and tight. If you look behind the tie, you'll see a label. The label serves the purpose of holding down the narrow end of the tie. If your tie doesn't have a label, you may want to use a tie tack or clip. What about footwear? Socks should match the rest of your clothes and should be pulled over the calf. Shoes must also be compatible with the rest of your clothes. For a business setting, you really can't go wrong with black leather shoes, either with or without laces. A high-gloss shine will add a nice finishing touch. A leather attaché or binder and a trench coat, depending on weather conditions, are nice accessories. Although women generally have a greater range of acceptable attire than men, most of the same rules of dress apply. Whatever way you wear your hair, make sure that it is neat. No hanging earrings or feathers. Use posts instead. The more conservative the earrings, the better. Go easy on the makeup. Use soft, subtle colors like this candidate did. Facial makeup should be light, natural, and should suit your own individual skin tone. And no bright color nail polishes either. Subtle or clear nail polish is your best bet. As far as perfume is concerned, use something light and in moderation. The same goes for men's cologne. Stay away from plunging necklines and high skirt slits. A kick pleat is more appropriate. Mandarin, Peter Pan, and Oxford point blouse collars are all appropriate. Stockings should be sheer and flesh tone, no seams or applique. Now, let's talk about women's shoes. Stay away from a high stiletto heel or a shoe which narrows to a point in front. The best type of shoe is a medium heel pump in a color which matches the rest of your outfit. A few words about jewelry. Don't wear any bracelets, unnecessary rings, necklaces, or flashy watches. These items may distract your interviewer. Finally, don't let all of your efforts on your appearance be wasted by either chewing gum or smoking. Chapter 5, Information on the Employer. Okay, let's say you now have a very professional look. Half the battle is won. But looking good isn't enough. You have to know your prospective employer inside and out. Your next step, therefore, is research. You must learn everything you possibly can about your prospective employer before the interview. The information you acquire will be a good source of questions for you to pose during the interview. And knowledge of the business will impress the interviewer with your interest in the employer and your initiative. Through your research, you may also discover that the employer is not right for you. You can then terminate your efforts with respect to that employer and focus your energy elsewhere. Let's say you received an interview through networking. A friend recommended you. Contact your friend and attempt to find out the name of the person you'll be interviewing with and ask what he or she is like. This should help you relate to the interviewer and will also help to cut down on your pre-interview anxiety. And having your contact put in a good word for you wouldn't hurt either. Now, picture the worst scenario. Suppose you know very little about the employer other than that it needs people in your particular field. What can you do? Where can you turn for information? Well, you might try any number of reference books obtainable at your local library. These reference books contain detailed information on thousands of corporations throughout the United States. Many of these sources also contain detailed information on the company's directors, officers, and key personnel. Good sources include Standard & Poor's Register of Corporations, Directors, and Executives, Moody's Investor Guides, and the Career Guide. An additional but often neglected source of information is a company's annual report. An annual report generally contains a description of the company, its goals for the year, and brief resumes of the individuals who manage it. This information is readily available for the asking. Many companies will mail it upon request free of charge. If not, you can telephone your stockbroker for this information. Once you find out the name of your interviewer, try to look the person up in one of the research directories. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be for your interview. So far, so good. You've obtained a lot of information about your employer. What do you do next? Study the material, evaluate it, store the information in anticipation of using it during your interview. One caveat here, be selective with the information you bring up during the interview. In researching the employer, you may uncover one or two blunders the employer has made in the past. Don't confront the interviewer with this information during your interview. Remember, you want to impress, not offend, your interviewer. Chapter 6, the interview. Generally, an interview proceeds in the following fashion. The first part of the interview is where the interviewer probes the applicant's background. The second portion is usually a short description by the interviewer of the employer. The last section of the interview is typically reserved for questions. These sections may and should overlap to some extent, depending upon your ability to make the interview more conversational. We'll show you what we mean by this a little later in the program. As a preliminary matter, let's discuss the psychology behind the interview process. A stereotypical interviewee is a bundle of nerves. It is normal to be nervous on an interview. A great deal often rides on getting that job as opposed to another, or no job at all. You may not be the only person who is nervous. The interviewer also has a lot of pressure on him or her. Any business is only as good as the people who work for it. It is both the goal and responsibility of the interviewer to find the right people for the employer. Usually, the only criterion the interviewer has are resumes and 15 to 20 minutes of face-to-face meetings with the applicant. Uppermost in an interviewer's mind is whether or not you will fit in. The way you present yourself will have a major impact upon the interviewer's ultimate determination in that regard. Now let's take another look at Mr. Peters. We'll go over his mistakes and propose ways they can be corrected. As you can see, he strides right in. You should walk in tall, erect, confident, but not arrogant or cocky, and at a much slower pace. Give your interviewer a chance to stand up and shake your hand first. And don't sit down until you are asked to be seated. A great deal is often made of handshakes. Many times people say that they can tell a lot about a person by his or her handshake alone. Shaking hands should be one smooth motion. It should not be jerky or exaggerated. The grasp should be firm but not uncomfortable. Keep in mind the physical stature of your interviewer before you crush his or her hand, along with your hopes of getting the job. And don't pump your interviewer's hand until it's ready to fall off. Sit up straight. Don't slouch. Mr. Peters looks as if he's lounging in his living room. Eye contact, too, is extremely important. It will show your interviewer that you're not intimidated by interpersonal contact. It's indicative of a person with a strong personality, a person who will be able to meet new people and deal with them on a one-to-one basis. Articulateness is another quality that is important in the interview context. It is also something you can work on at home with the interactive exercise contained later in this program. Everyone gets tongue-tied at times. This often happens as a result of trying to say too much too soon. Relax. If you prepare adequately for your interview, you will be in a position to shine. Just remember to speak slowly, clearly, and distinctly. There are ways to practice your pronunciation. One way is to read out loud. Pick up a newspaper or a novel and read out loud for 10 or 15 minutes a day. You should try to infuse your voice with strength and purpose. In all events, avoid speaking in a monotone.
This is an exercise which can increase the range and tone quality of your voice. Try this for 5 minutes a day.
Of course, it's not only the way you say things that counts, but also what you say. Take a look at Mr. Peters and pay close attention to what he actually says.
I'm sorry, Mr. Peters, I don't seem to have a copy of your resume. Did you bring an extra one?
No, I thought you'd have one.
No. Did you have any trouble getting here?
Yeah. It was a real hassle. I mean, I had to take 2 trains and both were late. It was lucky you guys fell behind schedule.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, there really isn't much to tell.
Why don't you try?
What do you want to know?
How about your education?
Put yourself in Mr. Rutherford's shoes. It was like pulling teeth in there. No matter how good Mr. Peters might look on paper, would you consider hiring him for your company? By being enthusiastic, articulate, well-informed, and self-confident, you will help yourself stand out from the rest of the job applicants. Here are some pointers. Always discuss your stronger points. If you've excelled in school, talk about that. If you've had positive related work experience or community service, by all means, stress those positives. A key ingredient to having a successful interview is knowing how to direct its course. Be the navigator of your own interview. But don't be evasive. Be honest and answer the questions posed to you by the interviewer. But always try to maneuver the conversation back to your most favorable points. For example, suppose you are asked about your education, and say you were an average student, but that you took part in community programs in your spare time. You might say something like this.
Although I was an average student, I spent a great deal of time doing volunteer work at the hospital.
Knowing your own personality is critical. Ask other people if you must. Then write down all of your strong and weak points prior to your interview. When you are being interviewed, try to touch upon as many positive aspects of your personality and background as possible. Then turn your strong points into questions pertinent to the interview. You can expect probing questions into your academic background. If that is one of your stronger points, by all means, talk about it in detail. Bring up any academic honors or awards you obtained, including scholarships. Discuss the courses you took and how they are presently helping you. Try to explain how you are applying what you have learned to real-life situations. Another area that an interviewer frequently explores is your previous work experience. Once again, go with the flow. If that is one of your strong points, talk about it at length. If not, answer the question as succinctly as possible and steer the conversation to something more positive. Hobbies, career objective, personal goals, and family background are other favorite sources for an interviewer's questions. Anything in your resume is also fair game, so be ready to discuss everything contained in it. In other words, practice your past. Another interview technique you may want to use is to diffuse your weaker points at the outset. Be careful with this technique, however. It should be used only in special circumstances where there is something in your background which is problematic and is already known by the interviewer or will surely be discovered prior to your receiving a job offer. For example, let's say you were dismissed in your first year of college because of poor grades. But suppose that after taking a year off, you returned to school, did well, and eventually graduated. Before you are asked the inevitable question, what happened during your first year, you might try to diffuse the question immediately.
My first year of college did not work out. But after taking some time off and working for a year, I realized how important school was. So I returned, worked harder, and obtained my degree. I was more focused and disciplined. The time off helped me mature and made me more serious about my goals.
A response such as this, up front, will diffuse potential questions your interviewer may have about this area of concern. But you'll have to judge for yourself what is the best thing to do in your particular situation. Now let's get even more specific and review individual questions which are often asked during interviews. The answers provided by Mr. Peters are meant to give you a flavor of the types of responses that can be used. Of course, there are an infinite number of responses which would be satisfactory. An ice-breaking question that is often asked is, did you have any problems getting here today?
Not at all. It's great that this location is close to the train station.
Even if you don't like having to take the train, it's important to try to find something positive to say. Negative responses may not be taken kindly. Indeed, an interviewer may think, hey, if this person complains now, what is he going to be like on a daily basis? Other frequently asked questions include, what's your career objective? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What is your definition of success? What can you bring to our firm? What is your greatest strength? And what's your biggest weakness? A word about salary. Don't you bring it up. If the employer broaches the subject, don't make any demands. Express your flexibility and indicate a willingness to discuss the job in further detail. If possible, put off any discussion about salary until after you are offered the position. A discussion about salary is contained in the next chapter. As we said before, the last portion of the interview is often reserved for any questions the candidate may have about the employer. If the employer with which you are interviewing is expanding into new areas, you may be interested to know what impact expansion will have on the employer's present business. You may also want to know the long-range goals of the employer, or the kinds of responsibilities you'd be given at the outset and how, if at all, they would change over the course of time. To a great extent, the questions that come to mind will depend on the information you learn during your particular interview. So keep an open and alert mind during the interview for possible questions to ask later on. Now, let's see how this job candidate does with a little preparation.
Come in.
Mr. Hiller, this is Maria Estevez.
Oh, Miss
Thank you.
Estevez.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Sit down. Make yourself comfortable.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I don't seem to have my copy of your resume. Did you bring one with you?
Yes, I did. Here you are.
Did you have a hard time finding the place today?
Not at all. It's great that your location is so close to the train station.
Tell me a little bit about your academic background.
Well, my first year of college did not work out, but after taking some time off and working for a year, I realized how important school was. So I returned, I worked harder, and obtained my degree. I even graduated in the top half of my class. I took a wide variety of courses such as marketing, sociology, psychology, and business law. And these courses have helped me a great deal in my current part-time sales position, enabling me to better understand the psychology behind the sales process. Last year, I was the top salesperson in my region.
Well, that's great. But if you're doing so well in your position, why do you want to leave it?
I've learned a great deal from my current employer, but I'd like to take the next step and obtain a position in marketing. I believe my sales background would be extremely useful to me in that regard. Unfortunately, although I've been very happy with my current employer, they don't have any marketing positions available, and if I stayed, I would have to remain in sales.
Well, how did you find out about us?
A friend of mine told me that you were looking to fill an entry-level marketing position. I did some research on your company, I liked what I read, and I decided to send you a resume. I believe your company, with its long-term expansion goals, can offer me the career growth potential that I'm looking for.
Well, that's true. And the company has been growing rapidly. But what I'd like to know is, why should we hire you?
I'm enthusiastic. I always give 100% of myself. I like working with people. I'm goal-oriented and self-motivated, as can be seen from my current sales record and my involvement in community projects. When I was in college, I devoted 10 hours a week to doing volunteer work at a local hospital. And I know your company is very involved in community projects, and I would like to participate in them. How much responsibility would I be able to take as a new employee in these projects?
Just as much as you want. There are no barriers, and the company encourages its employees to participate. Now tell me about your career goals.
I would like to work my way up the marketing management ladder. I would love to eventually have the ultimate responsibility for the overall marketing plan for one or more of your company's products.
Okay. Tell me what you think is your most favorable characteristic.
My determination, because once I set my mind to something, I see it through to the end. A good example is the way I set and achieved my goals with my current employer.
Now tell me what you think is your most unfavorable characteristic.
Sometimes I set goals for myself that aren't realistic. For example, last year I told myself I would continue to do the volunteer work I did when I was in college, and I just couldn't find the time.
I see. Are there any questions you'd like to ask me?
Yes, I read that your company is considering opening a European office to oversee European sales. Do you know how far in the future this will take place?
That's an excellent question. I'm really glad you asked that. We're really excited about this move. It should happen in 2 months. Do you have any other questions?
Yes. How long would it typically take for a person entering at my level to be given the ultimate responsibility for the marketing plan for a product?
Okay, there's no set time period. You should be able to reach it generally within 2 years. Are there any other questions?
No, that's about it. Let me just say that I am very interested in this position, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Miss Estevez.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Hiller.
We should be getting in touch with you within the next 2 weeks. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call.
Thank you.
This job candidate stands a good shot at getting the job. The candidate was prepared and had a polished professional appearance. Now it's your turn. It's time to put the techniques you've learned to use. We will conduct a simulated mock interview. After each question is asked, pause the tape and, in your own words, respond to it. This interactive portion of the tape should give you a feel for the interview experience. You should run through this exercise often, improvising to keep yourself fresh and improve your responses. Also, consider devising your own questions which you think an interviewer might ask, especially ones related to your resume. Remember, just about anything is fair game in an interview. Are you ready? Let's begin.
Good morning. I'm Howard Rutherford. Please, be seated.
I don't seem to have a copy of your resume. Did you bring an extra one? Did you have any trouble getting here? Tell me about your academic background. Has your education helped you at work? What other experience do you have? How did you hear about us? Why do you want to leave your present position? Why do you think we should hire you? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What is your greatest strength? What is your biggest weakness? What do you think of capital punishment? Do you consider yourself an organized person? Do you have any questions?
Okay, how did it go? Were you able to handle the question on capital punishment? Many times an interviewer will ask a question which has nothing to do with the employer or, for that matter, the interview itself. The interviewer will do it just to see your reaction and how well you handle yourself in a difficult situation. Don't get flustered. Remember, be honest. If you have an opinion on the subject, state it. If you feel the question is too personal in nature, then say so and politely refrain from answering. In any case, always try to maintain your poise. You may want to have a friend or family member observe and critique your responses to the interactive exercise. If you have access to a video camera, you may even want to record your responses to see how you look from the interviewer's perspective. Be particularly aware of any distracting mannerisms you may have. With a little practice, you can sharpen your interviewing skills and acquire the professional appearance you need in the competitive job market of the 90s. And finally, whenever you leave an interview, forget about what happened during it. Try to treat it as water under the bridge and begin preparing for your next job hunting activity. If you know you made a blunder, correct it for your next interview. But don't agonize over it. Simply do the best you can and keep trying. Persistence is the key to a successful job hunt. Chapter 7, Follow-up. As soon after your interview as possible, preferably that very same day, you should send a thank you letter to your interviewer. Basically, it should thank the interviewer for his or her time and confirm your desire for the position. You should use this opportunity to restate your skills, which would be particularly useful to the employer, or add useful information which was neglected during the interview. Okay, you've sent a thank you letter. Now what? Keep track of the time that goes by. If you were told you'd hear something in a week, and a week has gone by with no response, give your interviewer a call. Most employers will respect your timely follow-up. After all, they're looking for persistent and conscientious employees. One important caveat, however, don't make the phone call confrontational by stating, or even implying, that the employer is late in responding to you. Well, we're almost done. Let's say you've been offered a job. Are you finished now? Not quite. You need to discuss salary. Now, if you're really serious about your job hunt, you'll have done some research on salary before your initial interview. It's imperative that you have a good idea of the compensation range for the type of job you're seeking. Good sources for this information include your friendly neighborhood reference librarian and your contacts. You may be wondering why this is so important to do before the interview. After all, didn't we say earlier that you should try to postpone any salary negotiation until after you've gotten the job? We sure did. But what if the interviewer insists on discussing it? Then you need to state a reasonable salary range. If you haven't done your homework, you'll be forced to guess. Guess too high, and you've priced yourself out of a job. Guess too low, and you may get yourself a job, but at a salary which might be considerably less than what you could have had. Why not invest a little time in some research instead? It could be worth thousands of dollars to you over the course of employment. And don't forget fringe benefits such as health and life insurance, vacation leave, and retirement benefits. Also, strike your best deal before accepting the offer. Once you accept, most of your bargaining leverage is gone. Well, that's it. You now have the tools to make your job hunt a successful one. Just remember, especially during tough economic times, be prepared and be aggressive. We wish you the very best in your job search. Good luck and happy job hunting.